So meninges are protective in nature, and they are protecting the central neural system, both the brain as well as the spinal cord. And meninges are the protective three layers from outside to inside. They are namely dura mater, arachnoid, and pia mater. The dura mater, now dura stands for the durability, dura stands for hardness. So this matter or this layer is the hardest of all these three layers, and it is the outermost thick double layer of fibrous tissue. But remember, it is non-vascular in nature. So because the cells in this layer are living cells, so they do not have vascular supply, so they obtain nutrition or they pass out their waste matter through the process of diffusion. So diffusion is the process through which the cells of dura mater, they obtain nutrition and etc. And because it is hard in nature, it resists the movement of the brain, so it is protective in nature. And remember that the inner surface of this membrane or this layer carries simple squamous epithelium. Remember that if we draw the cranium or the skull bone in this manner, then there is a small gap between the cranium and the dura mater, and that gap can be called as the supradural space or the subcranial space. And below that space we have the hard outer thick double layer of fibrous tissue, which is called as the dura mater. Now below the dura mater again we have some space. That space can be called as the subdural space. Sub stands for below and supra stands for above. So this subdural space is present there, and below that we have the next layer, which is thin comparatively and is called as the arachnoid membrane. Let's learn about it. So the arachnoid membrane, arachna, I already told you, stands for spider. So it appears to be a spider web, or you can say it appears to be reticular or branched in nature. That's why it is called as arachnoid. It is the middle layer, thin layer, which appears to be webby in appearance because it is rich in reticular connective tissue, which we have already covered in the 7th chapter of animal tissues. And this layer is non-vascular again. That means it obtains its nutrition by the process of diffusion, and wastes are passed out through diffusion. And then remember, instead of just one, because we learned in dura mater we have the innermost surface covered with squamous epithelium. In this case, squamous epithelium is again present, simple squamous epithelium, but on the both surface, upper surface as well as the inner surface. The surface which faces the subdural space, and the one which faces the subarachnoidal space, both the surfaces will have the squamous simple epithelium tissue. Now there is a space between the dura mater and the arachnoid, and that space is called as the subdural space, and this space is fluid filled space. Remember, this fluid is important because it helps as a shock absorber. It also provides mechanical help to the brain. It also provides buoyancy to the brain. You all know the concept of buoyancy in 9th class or in the junior classes. You have learned about that when something is heavy, if it is immersed into the water, it becomes lightweight. So brain is heavy, but it appears to be light to us because it is present in the fluid filled spaces. So this fluid filled space is called as the subdural space. And then below this space between the cranium and the dura is also present there, which is called as supradural space or the subcranial space. Now the next layer is the pia mater. Now that means below the cranium we have a space followed by dura mater. Below dura mater we have a space followed by the arachnoid membrane. Now again there is a space which is called as the subarachnoid space, and then below that we have the pia mater. So what is pia now? Pia stands for the tender. So it is moderately tough. So it's not that tough, it is moderately tough inner layer. And remember, this is the only meninges which is vascularized. It is highly vascularized and pigmented, so it receives the blood supply, and the reason is it is in direct contact with the surface of brain. And then the second thing, it has a direct supply of vascular tissue into it. So it is its inner surface has the simple squamous epithelium. The space between the arachnoid and the pia mater is called as the subarachnoid space, which has the cerebrospinal fluid. Now you need to remember one thing here. The fluid which is present in this space is the only cerebrospinal fluid. In all other spaces what we have learned, the space is covered again with a fluid, but that fluid is not cerebrospinal fluid. The role of this fluid and how it is formed we'll be learning in this chapter. Now remember this pia mater is supposed to fuse with the roof of the brain at two places. So remember, pia mater is the innermost one, so it makes contact with the brain at two places, and those two places it forms a structure which is called as the choroid plexus, and this is responsible for the formation of the cerebrospinal fluid. So this fluid is formed with the help of fusion of pia mater with the white matter of the brain, and that portion where this fusion takes place, that portion of pia mater is described as the choroid plexus. There are two choroid plexus. One is anterior in front, the other is posterior at the back side. We'll be learning about them in detail.